Hi, everyone. Welcome to this evening's presentation of Youth and Vaping. I'm Sarah Grippa. I'm the co-founder of the Marijuana Education Initiative. And just a little background on who I am and what the Marijuana Education Initiative is. My business partner and I were educators in Northwest Colorado at an alternative high school. And we worked there in the years prior to and during the push for recreational marijuana in our state. And after recreational marijuana sales began in the state of Colorado, our students came to us and had a lot of questions, and they wanted to know the differences between medicinal and recreational marijuana. And we heard statements such as, well, if it's legal, it can't be that bad for us. My parents use it, it shouldn't be that bad. People use it as medicine. And then we also saw an increase in youth use. And we had a lot of students who were needing to be able to pass urinary analysis for probation or diversion, and we're having problems with that. And we wanted to find something that we could teach in our classrooms that addressed marijuana as a legalized substance, because it was in our state. So we needed to change the dialogue around it, kind of moving away from those antiquated approaches of the past and the just say no approaches. And there wasn't anything out there. So we set out to create something for our students and for our school. And we worked with specialists in numerous fields. We worked with pediatricians, neurologists, certified addiction counselors, endocannabinoid specialists. In fact, we even worked with members of the cannabis industry so that we could understand the potencies and the products that are out there and how the products are made. And we created content for our school. And then other schools in Colorado started asking what we were doing, what we were using, and we started then providing content for other schools. We created our own company, and then we moved into not only prevention curriculum, but intervention curriculum and alternative to suspension programs. And then we started doing that full time, and we ended up leaving our school, and this is what we do. Then vaping came on the scene. And I think for anyone who works in education or parents of adolescents, we can all attest to the fact that when vaping came on the scene, it came on pretty quickly. And we were asked by educators and administrators in the schools where we were working, addressing marijuana use, we were asked if we could start addressing vaping. And so we did. And I've been doing some work with some of the beach cities and Redondo, and was asked to come and do a presentation for you guys this evening about youth and vaping. So here we go. All right, I'm going to start with the components of an e-cig. There's three main components of an e-cigarette or a vape. You'll hear me kind of use those terms interchangeably throughout tonight's presentation. An e-cig or a vape has three main components. You have a liquid cartridge that contains the chemical compound, which is typically a flavoring and or your THC oil or your nicotine oil. This is commonly called an e-liquid, which actually has a product that is heated to the aerosol, and then it's inhaled and it becomes like a puff of vapor. You have your heating element that is known as the atomizer, and then you have a rechargeable battery that's used to power the atomizer. The components of an e-cig continued. When a person vapes, he or she activates the atomizer with the battery. That heats up the e-liquid and turns it into an aerosol. The aerosol is then inhaled, and it carries the concentrates of that liquid into billowing clouds of flavored smoke. It's not actually smoke, but that's kind of what it looks like. Some background on vaping. The first e-cigs came into the market around 2006. Vaping started to gain popularity and was marketed as a way for nicotine-addicted cigarette users to still get nicotine without having to smoke a cigarette. Big tobacco's takeover. One thing that we found really interesting when talking to youth who are vaping, and when we start talking to them about their thoughts on cigarette smoking, they talk about big tobacco, and they have this idea that vaping is kind of bucking the system. Like they wouldn't ever, fall victim to big tobacco. and they don't understand that big tobacco is very much involved in the world of vaping. So when we talk about big tobacco's involvement in the world of vaping, talking about a time frame let's start looking at 2006 to 2016. Big tobacco started taking notice of vaping, and they were really concerned because if users were moving, cigarette smokers were actually moving to vapes as a way to scale down their use of cigarettes and reduce their dependency on actual cigarettes and swapping that out, that was a loss of revenue for tobacco companies. So they started investing billions of dollars in developing products so that they could then keep pace with that and move beyond cigarettes to keep money in their pockets. So vape was an early vape type product, an early e-cig product, and it was bought out by British American Tobacco. In 2015, Reynolds America purchased Blue and Views, which were also very popular e-cigs. In the Ultra Group, which is the parent company of Philip Morris, one of the biggest tobacco companies in the United States, they acquired the makers of Vivid and Solaris, which is a leading e-cigarette company in Britain. And probably some of these companies are not sounding, or some of these e-cigs are not sounding that familiar to you, because in 2016, Juul hit the market, and it quickly began outselling all other brands. And now when we talk about vaping, many times we talk about it in the terms of juuling. Many of you have heard the term juuling. And if you look at the image on your screen right now, you are looking at a Juul starter pack. You have your cartridge here that has your juice in it. You have your thing that has the atomizer. You have your rechargeable unit, and that starter pack would be $49.99. Excuse me. You can see that when Juul hit the market in 2016, that was just beginning. In 2017, Juul sales drastically started increasing. By 2018, Juul dominated the market above and beyond all other vapes and e-cigs. Statistics about e-cig use in the U.S. In 2018, 3.62 million middle and high school students are current users of e-cigs. E-cigarette use from 2017 to 2018 increased 78% among high school students and 48% among middle school students. According to a 2013-2014 survey, 81% of current youth e-cig users cited the availability of appealing flavors as a primary reason for their use. A single product accounts for much of the increase in youth use, and that is Juul e-cigarettes. It's not difficult to see the connection between the increase in youth vaping use and the increase in Juul sales. Again, when we go back to those first two statistics, or the second statistic, there's an increase in use from 17 to 18, 78%. Again, we see that increase along with it parallels the increase in sales among Juul. A little history on Juul. Juul is actually a child company of Pax Labs, which was a cannabis vaping company when it began. Juul's stated mission is to help adults quit smoking cigarettes with the goal of improving the lives of the world's 1 billion adult smokers. However, Juul is getting kids hooked on nicotine at alarming rates. In December of 2018, the company that makes Marlboro cigarettes bought a portion, a third of the company of Juul for $12.8 billion. What exactly is in the device, in a vaping device? Although no combustion process happens when one uses a vaporizer, the heating of products in a device makes chemical particles very small so they can pass through the lungs into the bloodstream and go into the brain, affecting the whole body in the process. Using a vaporizer, introduce several chemicals into the lungs, such as nicotine, nicotine salts, volatile organic compounds, and diacetyl, which we'll examine as we continue to move along in these slides. So let's talk a little bit about nicotine. Nicotine is in most vaping devices and all unaltered Juuls. And a lot of people don't realize that there is nicotine in all unaltered Juuls. We've talked to many youth who say, well, I'm just vaping such and such flavored, oils. If they are using a Juul, there is nicotine in that Juul. So nicotine acts like a neurotransmitter in the brain and can directly activate receptors. Nicotine is the third most addictive chemical in the world, following heroin and cocaine, all of which increase the level of neurotransmitters, of the neurotransmitter dopamine. And that affects the brain pathways that control reward and pleasure. And that is why nicotine is so incredibly addictive. 2/3 of users of nicotine experience addiction to the chemical. So again, talking about people surprised that there is nicotine in my Juul. 63% of Juul users don't know that there is nicotine in unaltered Juuls. Juul contains almost as much nicotine as a traditional cigarette. And there is the equivalent of 200 puffs of a cigarette in 1 Juul cartridge. This also means that 10 puffs of a Juul delivers roughly the same amount of nicotine as smoking an entire cigarette. So when we talk about the equivalent of 200 puffs of a cigarette in 1 Juul cartridge, the original picture when we started talking about Juul and I showed you that cartridge, that is the size of a cartridge. So 200 puffs of a cigarette in one of those cartridges. A lot of youth who are vaping regularly will use multiple cartridges a day. So 10 puffs of a Juul delivers roughly the same amount of nicotine as an entire cigarette. So if they're using multiple cartridges a day, we are talking about a significant amount of nicotine. And that's why we are seeing high addiction rates among youth who are Juuling. Nicotine salts. And this is where the science gets kind of complicated. In traditional cigarettes, ammonia is added to the formula, basically to make a smoker freebase the nicotine. This increases the effects and the potency of the chemical. Freebasing the chemical, it alters the compound to make it more potent and therefore more addictive. E-cigs don't work the same as cigarettes. So early on, when creating the technology for Juul, Cox Labs discovered that by adding benzoic acid to nicotine salts, which actually naturally occurs in tobacco, that they could mimic the traditional cigarette's rapid nicotine delivery. So that's how they were able to essentially mimic the freebasing of nicotine that happens in traditional cigarettes, but mimic it in vaping. So therefore they have that potent and addictive component of the nicotine in vaping. So addictive combination, the nicotine salts and the benzoic acid are then combined with something called a volatile organic compound, a VOC, which carries the nicotine with it into the body when vaped. This combination, often accompanied with a synthetic flavoring like mint or creme brulee, is the juice in the e-cigs. So when we are talking to youth and they are saying, oh, I have cucumber flavored or a mint flavored juice, or a watermelon flavored or bubblegum flavored juice. And we're going to talk about these flavorings a little bit later and how they're really marketed to youth. That is the e-juice and it's flavored. So you have your nicotine salts and the benzoic acid, and then you have your VOCs, and then you have your flavored oils all in here. And then that's your juice. So we're going to talk a little bit more about the e-juice. So what are volatile organic compounds? One of the VOCs is propylene glycol. and vegetable glycerin. These are chemicals in the device that are the smoke-like substance that is inhaled. Propylene glycol is actually something that's used in fog machines. So if you ever go to a concert or a theater show and they have those smoke machines that creates kind of that smoke and fog, that is propylene glycol. And if you've ever had the opportunity to feel propylene glycol, it has a really weird kind of slimy, oily substance to it. In our curriculum, we actually have students feel the propylene glycol because that is essentially what is in that liquid, and that's something they're inhaling into their lungs, and it's not intended to be inhaled into their lungs. Volatile organic compounds are considered to be likely cancer-causing compounds. And VOCs are released when the liquid in that juice is in a vape pen is heated to the point that it becomes an aerosol. So you have these VOCs, these volatile organic compounds, and they are heated up to a temperature that they become an aerosol. And that is why then when you see people vaping, they have essentially these big plumes of what looks like smoke, but it's it's actually really not. It's an aerosol essentially. So you might see these big plumes of things coming out of a vehicle in front of you or something like that, but it's this aerosol that's heated. And so you have these propylene glycol and all these other volatile organic compounds that are heated up that are not designed to actually be heated up and taken into the lungs. There was a study done by the American Academy of Pediatrics in 2018. They did urine tests of teens who vaped, and they tested some of these volatile organic compounds that are found in the juice of these e-cigs. And I'm not going to try to pronounce these for you because I just butchered them. But they tested these 5 different toxins, and they showed elevated levels of these in teens who had vaped compared to teens who had not vaped. So we do know that these organic compounds, these volatile organic compounds that are known to be cancer causing, are present in the urine of teens who are vaping. What else is in the device? Diacetyl. It's a chemical used to produce artificial butter flavoring in butter popcorn. So let's talk about microwave popcorn real quick. When you pop that popcorn in the microwave and you dump it out in your bowl and you look on the inside of your microwave bag and there's that film, kind of that oily stuff, that is part of a chemical, diacetyl. It's actually been modified a little bit now and cleaned up. But years ago, workers in popcorn factories started to get this lung condition from diacetyl, and they started calling it popcorn lung because it was created from this diacetyl that was used in this artificial flavoring in the butter popcorn. And it was because they were inhaling this diacetyl in the factory. So what does it do? What does this have to do with vaping? Diacetyl is one of those organic compounds that is in, or those volatile organic compounds that's actually in the e-cigarette juice. And it is part of those things that is when heated up, it's taken into the lung. And then what happens with popcorn lung is it constricts airways, causing shortness of breath. It can cause blue-tinged fingertips, wheezing, crackling, and fatigue. And it's not known to ever be reversible. Now, one thing that a lot of school districts are facing when they have a youth who is caught with a vape pen, many times administrators or even parents don't necessarily know for sure what is in the vape. And that is because vapes are easy to hack. It's called hacking your Juul or hacking your vape. You can go on and you can just Google how to put THC oil in your Juul or how to hack your Juul. There have been a number of cases where Juuls have actually been hacked with other things. In West Virginia this fall, kids had bought some hacked vapes off of the street, and some of them were actually had been infused with fentanyl. And we actually worked with a school district in Colorado where kids were taking their vapes. And I guess I should back up and explain why kids would have their vapes refilled. So kids can buy a starter pack or get someone to buy them a starter pack with their Juuls and their cartridges. And then if they're under 18 or under 21 in some states, it's maybe harder for them to get their Juul cartridges. And so what they do is they take their cartridges, and they might have somebody who says, well, I can refill your cartridges for you. And we will talk about that, the refilling of the cartridges a little bit later. And so they'll take it and somebody will refill their cartridges for them. And they'll put a binding agent, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later, put some nicotine, maybe they want THC oil in there, whatever, and they'll pay somebody to refill their pods. And some students were doing this in a town we were working in Colorado, and the person they were buying from actually decided to infuse their pods with meth, unbeknownst to the students who were buying it. Some of them ended up in the hospital. And then finally, some kids came clean to their parents as what had happened, and the man was actually arrested. But again, students have no idea what's actually going into the pods that they are taking to be infused. Other students knowingly want to put stuff in their pods. So parents and administrators are faced with this difficult situation of trying to figure out exactly what is in the pod. Some school districts have to make the assumption that it is more than nicotine. Maybe it is THC, and so they have to address it as a drug charge as opposed to a nicotine charge, things like that. So same with parents. So it's a very difficult thing, but anything that you needed to know about how to hack a Juul is on YouTube. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there. We're going to talk a little bit more about the risks of hacking a Juul or hacking a vape a little bit later. Stealth vaping. There is a lot of talk about why vaping has become such a cultural phenomenon and a cultural identity among youth. And there are a lot of reasons about it, but it has an identity component. And a lot of kids like to be stealth vapors or ghost vapors, things like that. We talk to students who have used vaping as part of their identity. Maybe it's a student who doesn't want to drink or doesn't want to do drugs, but also doesn't want to be the kind of goody two-shoes student who doesn't do anything bad. So vaping kind of became their thing. Maybe they're a stealth vapor who's great, who can actually vape in school, in the classroom, and not get caught. They'll vape, they'll blow into their sleeve, the teacher doesn't know, and that kind of becomes part of their identity. There's also these stealth vaping products. On the left of the screen, we have a sweatshirt, and the cord of the sweatshirt is actually a vape. On the right, we have a Camelback hydration pack that also is a vape delivery system as well. This looks like a Apple Watch, and it's actually not an Apple Watch. It is in fact a vape. A lot of schools have had to start banning Apple Watches because it's hard for them to determine whether or not it's an Apple Watch or a vape. So again, a lot of students have found a sense of identity in vaping, and a lot of students use it for stress reduction, things like that. And there's a lot of interesting products and technology-driven products that students find appealing. There are also a lot of flavorings that are really driven towards students. You have strawberries and bubble gum and flavorings that youth find incredibly appealing. This these flavorings and this watch, these things can actually just be ordered online by going on and clicking and saying that you are in fact 18, and that's all you have to do, and you can order these products online. So again, there's a lot of marketing that really is pointed toward youth, and allows them to vape undetected, to have kind of these cool, trendy, youth-driven things, flavors that are driven toward youth, and kind of gives them the social identity as well. And those are kind of what students are saying to us as far as reasons that they find vaping incredibly appealing. The CDC. So as many of you probably know, there was a lot of things happening in the vaping world, or not in the vaping world, but as far as lung disease and things happening last summer, it really seemed to increase in August and September, kind of peak in September of last year. And we haven't heard a lot about it recently. Obviously, we've had other things going on, but it has kind of slowed down a little bit. But I wanted to kind of update you on what we know currently. As of February 18th, 2020, a total of 2,807 people were hospitalized with e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. Cases or deaths have been reported to CSC from 50 states. 68 deaths have been confirmed in 29 states. All patients have reported a history of e-cigarette use or vaping products. Most patients report a history of using THC-containing products. In most all the cases, we see dual use. And when I say dual use, we are talking about nicotine and THC products. The latest national and state findings suggest products containing THC, particularly those obtained off the street or from other informal sources, were the main cases or played major roles in the outbreak. And again, when I was talking earlier about hacking pods or having pods refilled, that's where I said we had talked more about those refilling those and the risks around that. When we are looking at what happened with the lung diseases that we were hearing about, the hospitalizations and the deaths that we saw, it really tended to peak in August and September, and it kind of leveled off a little bit and it kind of gotten a little bit under control. The reason that we saw a lot about it, and it took a little while to figure that out, it had to do with vitamin E acetate. Vitamin E acetate was being used a lot of times in what we call illegal or street purchases of active vapes. And when we talked about the e-juice and we talked about those volatile organic compounds or those binding agents, people were taking pods or buying pods from the street that had been hacked with either nicotine or THC or whatever. You needed to have a binding agent that would carry that nicotine or THC after heated into the lungs. So a lot of places or people were using vitamin E as that binding agent, something that was available that could be purchased at grocery stores, supermarkets, things like that, to be used as a binding agent. It's a vitamin that can be found in many foods, including vegetable oils, things like that. Vitamin E acetate usually does not cause harm when ingested as a vitamin or supplement. However, it's not typically something, it's never been studied as something that can be heated up and inhaled. So what the common thread that they often found in these cases of dual use was that the binding agent used when these items were purchased off the street or at an illegitimate type of business was that the vitamin E had been purchased as a binding agent. So imagine vitamin E in that form. If any of you have used vitamin E cream or something before, you take that, you put it in a pod, you add your nicotine, THC, whatever, and then you heat that up, and it turns into an aerosol and you inhale it. But once it gets into the lungs, it cools and it goes back to its original form. And when it cools and goes back into its original form, that is then what is in your lungs. So that is kind of what caused a lot of what was happening this summer and fall as it relates to what we are seeing in the news around the lung disease and the deaths related to vaping. The reasons that we likely saw a decline following all of that was increased public awareness around the risks associated with that, and then a rapid public health response and the removal of vitamin E acetate from these products, and then potentially law enforcement actions related to illegal products. So what we do know, vaping nicotine, THC, or flavored e-juice is not harmless. Nicotine is extremely addictive. Most vaping devices, including Juuls, have high levels of nicotine, almost as high as a traditional cigarette. The effects of inhaling the chemicals in vaping devices is unresearched and unknown. And then I wanted to leave just some of these resources to help quick up on the screen for you. Thank you for joining this webinar. I think we have a few people here that are going to speak. You can visit our website at marijuanaeducation.com if you have any questions. We have an information email site there that you can reach out as well.
Hi, my name is Ronnie, and I'm a freshman at Vitamin E in high school, and I'm also in the Beach City Health District Youth Advisory Council. In the Youth Advisory Council, when it comes to making decisions, everything is very much a team effort. At the beginning of our meetings, we usually split off into groups to work on different campaigns and aspects of the council, and then at the end of our meetings, we come together to give each other feedback on the progress. For example, when the group that was going to design these slogans came and narrowed it down to the top 5, at the end of our meeting, they presented it to the 80+ members for a vote. Our members consist of 8th graders in middle school to 12th graders, seniors in high school, and everything in between from multiple different schools. So we get a wide variety of ideas and opinions to help form community like the slogans. In the Youth Advisory Council, we teens get to be very independent and choose to work in groups involving what we're passionate about, like the substance use campaign. It's crucial that teens come together to help other teens, since we're the future of the beach cities. And we can't form a functioning community without happy and healthy members. We're very confident that this campaign and these powerful slogans will make an impact, and we hope that you can support this effort.
I'm Sylvester. I'm another sophomore. I'm a poster. I'm also both members of the Beach City Advisory Council. I'm another focus on substance abuse with vaping products, and we just created. We were part of the creation of slogans under this umbrella to landscape the vape. Yeah, so we have a couple slogans. We don't want to plod the pod. Stay. So the point of these cards are to reach out to kids our age and below in middle school and high school. And the cards here is something that can capture the attention of these kids. Plus, then on the back side, it's more qualitative and quantitative, like data explaining stuff. Plus, it has ULR links and URL. Whatever. There's links to the website that can let them know about more information about the cards. We did the vote for our entire Beach Cities Council, which again proved our group effort to see what the best slogan could be.
Oh, and these are going to be posted or at least advertised in middle schools and high schools in the beach cities. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the web broadcast of Vaping in 2020, What Parents Need to Know with Sarah Grippa. We appreciate Sarah taking the time to share her wealth of knowledge with us, and we look forward to seeing you on Thursday, April 30th at Hermosa Valley School for a conversation with Alex Gray and Kevin Sousa titled Surf Therapy, What Surf Therapy Taught Me About Overcoming Adversity. And on behalf of BC's Health District, Hermosa Beach City School District, Redondo Beach Unified School District, and Hatton Beach Unified School District, we thank you for joining us today.